Welcome to the GMS Magazine podcast or vidcast if you're actually watching this, which is great. Hi, if you're watching this, tell me what sign I'm doing now, just so I know that you're watching this. It doesn't matter, but it would be nice. I am Paco Garcia, obviously, your host. I have been Paco Garcia for the last 50 years, give or take. And if I sound a little bit weird today, it's because I am met up to my eyeballs thanks to an incredibly bad pack I have at the moment. It's got me completely packed with analgesics, which is why I may be a little bit on the idiotic side. Hi, Chris.
Hello, this is
You,
Chris from D6 Machina.
yes, you still are. You were last week. You still are this week,
I still am,
and you will probably be next week.
hopefully. It's
And this is a podcast, by the way, just so you know, about board games, role playing games, and the people who make them. And I know that other people claim to have a podcast about the people who make, games, but we were here first doing it a long time ago, and we are very cool for doing it. And we have a lot of things to talk about. We have some news from the world of gaming, and this is where a serious podcast would have a little snippet of music to introduce to the segment, but we don't.
sorry.
That'll do. Yeah, that's
That'll do.
because
That's it. That's what we have money for.
yeah, and you're gonna have to do that every time we change segments from now on. Okay, so we have news. What news do you have?
Well, okay. So I have a plethora of news, and now I'll try to go through it quickly here. So the first things we'll talk about, we'll go through some basic stuff. At the time of recording, we made some comments regarding the whole fiasco regarding OGL. We will get into that some more, just very very quickly. With since last week, we have had Cobalt announce their Black Flag. Paizo discussing their Orc system, which is an OGL. Now, what's interesting about this announcement, I got sorry, I had about a dozen people message me about this. I'm like, dude, I got this notice this morning, but I was getting notices, and then eventually I got a chain email from a bunch of internal people saying, hey, just FYI about this, and I was like, oh, cool, thanks for including me. And so I've been on the Paizo Orc thing. Now, the question is the fact that there is no mention, unlike Black Flag, there is no mention if this is a rule system. What it looks like, it's actually just a OGL written with original legal language that allows us to access. In my opinion, it's going to be a legal document that basically is a middle finger to Wizards of the Coast by having us gain access to rules without having to go through it. So it's basically them saying they won't let you use 5e with the OGL unless you sign on to the OGL. So here's an OGL that you can use that you can then use their rule system. And they basically say like they wouldn't be talking about lawyers and paying legal fees if this was a completely independent thing. They're creating an OGL document, in my opinion, that allows us to access 5e. And so that's kind of a big deal. And so that's been one big thing. And so a lot of people are waiting for that to come to fruition. We have had numerous people make comments, rumors, and so forth. Then the OGL 2.0 update came out, where Wizards of the Coast, in one of the most short-sighted ways of mitigating criticism I've ever seen, went and said, oh yeah, we both won. Like, no, we didn't. And they did finally admit to taking back the access to our IP clause and the royalty clause, but they're still trying to deauthorize the original OGL. Then came the announcement that they were tracking the cancellations of D&D Beyond, and which created the D&D Begone hashtag. And it was reported, rumor, this is part of the rumor mill, sorry, that nearly over 50,000 people canceled their D&D Beyond subscription over the course of a week. Now, we don't really know 100% how many people are signed on to D&D Beyond. I've heard numbers as high as 2 or 3 million, and 50,000 isn't a huge dent in them. And then just yesterday, we've had another update, which discussed that D&D Beyond may or may not be spiraling their VTT into an own separate entity. So you would have to pay for D&D Beyond and the VTT separately in order to access these games. There's also been talk that this D&D Beyond system, which allows access to virtual tabletop, will have several tiers. There's been talk that the image that was shared around was fake, but some people have said that the announcements, the leaks, according to were not, and that the upper tier of D&D Beyond was going to be $30 a month, and you had to pay that much if you wanted to run homebrew content. And last week, when I was on a podcast, sorry, I wasn't like slutting around with another podcast. This was a video interview. You're supposed to be insulted. I did a video conversation that went live on both our channels on How to RPG, which used to be called How to D&D, and he changed his name. He has about 50,000 subscribers, Frederick Wheeler. And he mentioned that because they haven't been hiring a lot of game writers. Instead, they've been hiring nearly 250 engineers from Microsoft, probably because the person that ran Wizards of the Coast got promoted and now runs Hasbro, and then they brought in a Microsoft executive to run Wizards of the Coast. And the whole objective of this, and people are seeing the tweaks, is to monetize players. And the way to monetize players is to turn D&D into a live service, all digital, microtransaction laden system, basically replicating FIFA, which is something we've talked about. Yeah. And it's looking more and more that that's going to happen. And
but the thing is, there is nothing wrong with that happening. And the thing is, if they were truly microtransactions, I would be up for that. No problems whatsoever. If you want to pay, I don't know, $2 to use this thing and $3 to use that other thing, and then another $5 to use that other thing that you don't necessarily need, but it is nice to have, no problem whatsoever. None at all. But if you're going to tell me that I'm going to have to pay you every month the same amount of money that I could use to invest in a whole new board game, F you. Not going to happen.
Yeah. And this is connected to the news that happened a couple of weeks ago before everything kind of exploded, where they announced that that Wizards of the Coast had quietly, not so quietly, canceled 6 video game projects. And the reason why is they don't want anything competing with their now MMO style D&D. And this is, in their opinion, what their system is going to be. This is basically what Dungeons & Dragons is going to be.
Which, again, not a problem, and still canceling those titles is completely stupid because they just canceled 6 gateways into their own platform. I really don't know what they're thinking, and I'm going to go on a limb here, but I'm going to say, and this is going to sound very condescending, it is. This is going to sound very sexist, it is not. But this is the second time, well, the third time, because Lisa Stevens was in front of Wizards of the Coast for a while. This is the third time, and twice. The second time, this second time a woman is pretty much running this place down because they come from a completely different industry. They've got absolutely no freaking clue about how this thing works, and they're trying to impose a view from a different industry into another one that really doesn't fit at all. Her comment that I just read in Facebook about D&D being completely under-monetized and that it should be monetized to the level of video games is an absolute PR disaster. So could please somebody bring Lisa Stevens back into D&D and let her do her job as she did with Paizo and WOTC at the time?
Oh, yeah, but it gets worse. The conversation I had with Frederick Wheeler, he had dropped that the big hurdle, because they want the FIFA money. They want a recursive spending system from people. And there's 2 issues with that. One, they're going to have a bunch of people who will lose and walk away. And they know that. And this comes to the whole, it's called ARPU, which is basically acquired revenue per unit, I think, which basically says, like, how much money are they making per person? And if they can get enough people to pay the $30 a month for this fantastic virtual tabletop merged D&D Beyond thing where all of D&D can happen virtually using this digital storefront, they can afford to lose up to 90% of their audience as long as they're in the positive. They can then spend their resources to claw that group back once they realize that's the only game in town. And the whole point is that they are going to slowly and quietly, they will print one D&D books, but they won't care about them. They are not going. They're probably already writing off the one D&D. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if, when it comes to publication, that they suddenly, we've decided we're not going to publish the one D&D. If you want to play one D&D, you have to pay for what D&D Beyond. But the one big hurdle from turning D&D into this recursive service is that you need the community to run the very platform that they require. And so Frederick Wheeler and I both said, he said it first, but he said, well, the only way they can do that is to get rid of the dungeon masters, because that's the one thing. You need dungeon masters to run the games that your players are paying to use. And if the dungeon masters abandon ship, then there's no one to play the game, and then your system dies. And ultimately, the game is determined not by the 80% players, but it is determined by the 20% GMs that are running the game. Sure, the players may decide, but a GM may say, I'm running this game, it's Pathfinder 2nd edition, and his friends is like, okay, whatever. Most players don't really care what system they use. And so if the DMs, GMs abandon Wizards of the Coast, then there's no one to play their game. So they have to replace the DMs with AI GMs. From the initial thing of having just a GM that just runs the dungeon, to eventually incorporating, and you don't hire 240 engineers if you don't do this, a chat GPT system where it's seemingly like you're talking to a real person, but you're not. You're talking to an AI that's running the whole thing. So by 2025, the guess is that we are going to have an entirely DM-less D&D Beyond, where you can simply just pay $1 and then have what seems like a real person, voice and everything, running your game without having to have a DM volunteer their services to run the game. And that was announced, that was leaked, that they are creating an AI DM. And a lot of people think that that's just simply a bot that's going to run the monsters. But I think that their eventual goal is to run a chat GPT variant where you can talk vocally to a AI, and it will respond as close to a human as possible. It'll be a nightmare because for a lot of people, like, there's certain improvisational abilities that computers currently lack. But if you looked at what the chat GPT is able to accomplish, you'd be amazed how good it is. It's kind of creepy.
The thing is, the reason why that I would be very surprised if it's going to work is because it's going to take other company about 20 minutes to come out with their own tool that will do exactly the same thing without having to use at all D&D.
Like I said, they're also not going after the virtual tabletops anymore, which is a big one. They're not going after the streamers, and that was the biggest one. On top of that, a lot of people have been critical of Critical Role, because Critical Role is probably the largest profile D&D side project, third-party developer that has not commented. We knew that a lot of the first parties were not saying much until suddenly they started. Cobalt Press, MCDM, and Paizo with their big org announcement. So we know that they were quietly working on something to announce. But Critical Role, which has no original system of their own yet, has been incredibly quiet. They ran their traditional live stream about a day ago. There was no mention of it. And other than a very politically safe message where they talk about supporting players and supporting GMs, they don't say anything that's critical of Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, the new OGL. They never say anything by name. And some people said that was Mercer subtly supporting our movement without biting the hand that feeds him. But other people are like, well, why isn't he biting the hands that feeds him? Like, Critical Role is already in the talks of abandoning 5e. And in fact, they were paid a lot of money to abandon Pathfinder, which was their original system, to adopt Dungeons and Dragons, and that's probably they're looking at their revenue stream from Wizards of the Coast. And because I have been talking about the sweetheart deals that were offered to several companies, and it's now looking very obvious that Critical Role was one of these companies that got a sweetheart deal. Some companies did, and there's been talk that there were at least a half a dozen major companies that signed on to the 1.108 OGL before everything leaked and went public. And now this OGL is being removed, so this contract is now null and void. But a lot of people are wondering which companies jumped on this 1.1 without thinking of the consequences or thinking of the public backlash. So that was the other thing. Finally, I'll talk about a very strange rumor, which I'm not going to say. Oh yeah, also Penny Arcade came out on the side of the Open D&D, which I was very happy about. So the one thing I thought was very bizarre, and somebody made a comment about this, and I was thinking the same thing, and I'm not a conspiracy nut, but I've noticed that the vast majority of YouTubers and publishers that are going hell or high water anti-Wizards, they're saying ban, like walk away from D&D, walk away from this, abandon anything related to Wizards. Your D&D has betrayed you. Come to Pathfinder. Almost every other system isn't saying abandon D&D. They're saying support the OGL, support third party. And that's what I'm saying. I've been on several, I posted some very, very, very big posts that people have been paying attention to that simply says, you can abandon Wizards, but don't abandon D&D. There's lots of third-party publishers out there that rely on this income stream. If you abandon them, you're basically killing a good chunk of the 3P market. You could actually lay a bigger finger to Wizards by abandoning them and then dumping your money into the third-party market and keeping the 5e third-party market alive. But a lot of people, Roll for Combat, a bunch of companies, Roll for Combat, remember, is the heart of this whole thing, right? They went from 3,000 subs to 13,000 subs in a week. They are the heartstone of this thing. Other people have spoken up, but they are peripheral. This has always been like Roll for Combat has been, and they are hardcore Paizo apostles. They have been swearing up and down. So many people have been saying, abandon this, go to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Not specifically, not go to Pathfinder, go specifically to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Roll for Combat / stream. Half of the stream was talking about the latest leak, and then half the stream was just talking about how awesome Pathfinder 2nd Edition is. And people need to remember, if you look at Roll20, their last announcement was at the end of 2021, so it's a bit dated. But at the time of that announcement, which was the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, they announced that Dungeons & Dragons had reached at almost 60% market share on Roll20. It had crossed 56% and was growing. Paizo was shrinking. Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2nd Edition combined was less than 5%, and Pathfinder 2nd Edition was less than 2%. So this push, part of it, I do believe, is Paizo very, very orchestrating, getting all of their YouTubers, all the supporters to say, abandon D&D, go to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, this unbelievably minority system that nobody is playing, despite what everyone's saying. And so when people tell me, why don't you support Pathfinder? I go, unless it grows beyond a 5% market share, there's no point. And somebody said that, and somebody said, you're a shill. And I said, you know what? He's not 100% incorrect. I do believe the Paizo community is taking this to fuel this ideology or this kind of idea of people abandoning D&D outright and abandoning all the third-party companies that publish for it, and then jumping on the Pathfinder bandwagon as people did back in 4th edition. But I think that is a very dangerous level of thinking because you're actually going to kill a larger market of the third-party industry than you think.
Well, I have thoughts about that kind of topic as well, because one of the things that I really am not liking at all, I am liking people's synergy against the things that Wizards of the Coast is trying to do. However, what I am not liking is this reactionary attitude without any kind of thought whatsoever. I think none at all. What you mentioned is definitely one of the bits. Do I think that Paizo is orchestrating? No, I don't think they have themselves from within the company itself, I would be very surprised if they have the infrastructure necessary to contact every um, YouTuber, TikToker, anybody who is now supporting Pathfinder Second Edition, um, and convince them somehow to go and support them. What I'm seeing is a next in line mentality. Everybody who produces for D&D is essentially producing D&D. So as soon as you stop looking at D&D, you stop looking at everyone producing for D&D. Who's next? And that's Paizo. That's the biggest after D&D, even though it is minuscule compared with D&D, but it is the biggest. So where are people going? They're going there. Now, we could argue about whether Pathfinder is a better system and a better game, and it has a better world. We could argue all those things. There is no question whatsoever. Paizo does great work, amazing work, and they support the line very, very, very well. But the reason why I think this is reactionary and no thought is being put into it is because Paizo, even though it may not look like it, they still support Paizo 1.0 quite a lot.
Yeah.
So why on
Well, it's
earth?
still a huge revenue stream. Paizo,
Correct.
the original Pathfinder, is still a larger ratio on Roll20 than Pathfinder Second Edition.
Correct. So why on earth are people going onto Paizo's Pathfinder Second Edition when they could go for First Edition and not having to change barely any of the rules whatsoever? I mean, with a few tricks here and there, you can play in any D&D world using Paizo's rules. So
well, I think it comes down to that conspiracy theory that people have mentioned, the fact that the only reason why is because Pathfinder Second Edition is failing. People don't want to abandon the first edition, and that they're trying to pump money into it because Pathfinder Second Edition is almost an entirely wholly original system. Like, it doesn't have any elements from the SRD in it. And the more they push Second Edition, the more they can push out any aspects of the original OGL from the Pathfinder First Edition. So there is an economic reason why they want to push Pathfinder Second Edition. And I think that's the reason why Second Edition is being pushed on us more than First Edition, is because Paizo wants Second Edition to be pushed.
I don't know. I think we should know, in order to know if this is a conspiracy or this has actually happened, I would love to hear and see how many review copies of Pathfinder Second Edition core rulebook have been sent to reviewers and TikTokers and whatever over the last couple of weeks, because that would give us a very good indication as to how much of an effort they're making to do this.
I am being somewhat flippant, by the way, by that. I'm not saying that there's literally 20 people in a room going, how can we destroy Wizards of the Coast? I think this started off I love using this term. There's a very famous anime called Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
And Ghost in the Shell has a sub-series called Standalone Complex. And a lot of people don't know what Standalone Complex is. It's a term that they made up. So if one person commits a crime, that's a one-person crime. If two people conspire to commit a crime, it's a conspiracy. But what if two people decide at the same time to commit the same crime without discussing it with each other? And so they create the idea of a standalone complex, the idea of dozens of people deciding at the same time to commit the same crime. And so that's what I think is here. Not that it's a crime, but I'm thinking that even though Paizo didn't come out and say it, I think a bunch of people that are trying to support Second Edition are pushing that narrative because they know Paizo needs Pathfinder Second Edition to be the dominant system out there.
Well, but the thing is, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they had used it as a strategy. I mean, it wouldn't. Paizo is a small company, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had, I don't know, a Monday morning meeting to plan the rest of the week, and somebody says, hey, what do we do? How do we use this to our advantage? And somebody from the PR department or whatever it is they have came to them and say, hey, do this, send review copies, take advantage that people are being angry now and jump in the bandwagon and be the first to do it. This is essentially what's also happening with everyone who is jumping onto, hey, we also have our own OGL. And
age system and
it's a bit,
Numenera.
It's a bit, okay, you already had it. Why haven't you been pushing for this until now? Okay, you're jumping in on the bandwagon, but it's low-hanging fruit at this point. I'm sorry to say, I am delighted, delighted that other people, or so many people, are looking at other systems. I'm really so happy that for once the focus is shifting to different games. I really am. But advertising right now that you have your own license, your content creator program, I'm sorry, stinks of, I'm not going to say desperation, but it stinks of opportunism.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit, don't tell me, if you want me to believe that you really want me to invest, if you want to make it worth it, don't tell me that you have a system. Tell me how I can use it. Tell me what am I going to get in return, and why should I be using yours? Sell it. But just telling me that it exists, that's bullshit. That
Yeah.
says nothing. I knew that Modifius had its system. I know that Pelgrane Press, who are actually keeping very silent about the whole thing, has their system. I knew that Monte Cook had their system. Cortex is out there as well. Why are you telling me now that you have it? I knew that. Tell me, why should I use it? What am I going to be getting out of it if I actually start using it? Because otherwise, why should I use one instead of the other? Why don't I just wait for a couple of months, see what happens with this new thing that everybody seems to be backing right now, and stay pretty much as I am? Why should it change
Well,
to 2D20?
yeah, like I said, for me, it's one of those situations where I think D&D is going to lose a bunch of people. I don't think like they'll lose this fight, but I don't think D&D is going to die. I think a lot of vocal
No.
people are going to walk away. But my hope is that people see this as the reason why they have to support third parties. So I'm hoping that when more third party publishers decide to stay with fifth edition and start putting out their content, that a lot of people will suddenly go, I got to support this because it's 5e third party. But for me, whenever people ask, and I actually had to do a video about this because so many people are just like, just abandon D&D and write for Numenera. And I go, Numenera has a 1% market share. And I keep on trying to explain to people, market share is everything. If it's back to the old West, which was the 2010, 2012 era, where we had 5 systems, all had equal shares, you're spending most of your time adapting your books to other systems rather than creating new books. And if you had one system that was encompassing, a lot of people say that's bad for the industry. Yeah, but it's great for publishers that want to write content. We can write multiple adventures, campaign worlds, and not have to worry about adapting it to multiple systems. You just have to adapt it to one. And it was a nightmare adapting Amethyst for 5 different systems back in 2014. I don't want to return to that point where I have to write the same book 3 different times in order to try to recoup my money. And that's one thing I've been trying to tell people. So yes, you're right. I do agree with that. The other thing I wanted to bring up as we get before just fun of some of the news, you mentioned it today, but a certain individual, I don't know if we should name or not, has decided to detonate his career. He was a you and I we share about well, I shared 57 friends with him. You shared a few. He's been losing a few since then. But unfortunately, he was also one of the admins for Fantasy Grounds official page.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of those situations where to anybody out there that ever listens to this, if you have political views that are not popular to the consensus, either think about changing your opinion or keep your mouth shut. Because if you know perfectly well that a certain meme is going to get you fired or kicked off or be canceled, it's one of those situations like, why can't you not stop yourself?
I don't know. For clarity, people, this is about a meme that somebody who's, to be perfectly honest, his name I can really remember, RJ something or other.
RJ Vermette.
That's the one. He posted about, and it's an illustration of somebody kicking somebody else in the face in a very taekwondo-looking manner. And the meme goes, how I react when somebody forces me to use their weird pronouns.
Special pronouns.
Special, I beg your pardon, special pronouns.
Yeah.
And it's a bit, okay, when something like this is brought to my attention, my initial reaction is going onto this person's Facebook wall and try to find out a little bit of a idea as to what their stance is. Because sometimes we post a joke that we think is funny in the moment because we don't think about it, or simply, I mean, I am one of these. I like tasteless humor. I like dark humor. I love it, and I make a ridiculous amount of jokes with some intimate friends that I would never in my life do in front of anyone else because they are completely stupid and ridiculous and really inappropriate. But I've learned that. Okay, so I understand that sometimes you don't realize that this could be offensive to some people, and you make a comment, you make a joke. So my stance is always going to this person, taking a look at what they generally think. And in this particular case, I actually saw a post saying, you know, if you're LGBTQI and you need a friend, or your family is ostracizing you, you're safe. Come here, which is a bit okay. I can see a discrepancy here. This is incongruent. I don't know what's going on. This is very incongruent. So I went to this person and asked. And instead of simply saying, I mean, because I did ask, do you understand why this has got you kicked out of being an admin for this group? Do you see that? Instead of just coming to me with a, I don't know, a reply of sorts, they got all hissy about it and blocked me.
Yeah, they've been blocking basically anybody who basically makes any kind of comment. I saw the name and I know this person. We were friends at some point, but at some point that either I deleted him or he deleted me. I can't remember who was who, but probably during the COVID thing at some point, because I lost about 150 friends during COVID, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of them. Because somebody who's a mutual friend posted about this, I said, I know this name, and I went, oh yeah, we're not friends, but we share 57 mutual friends. And I looked at his history. I was like, yeah. And just recently, he's been kind of doubling down on his political views, and I was just like, okay, so this person thinks he can still have a career after this. I go, okay, well, good luck, because no one's going to hire you. So here's one more thing I wanted to mention before we kind of move on to something else. I find it very ironic with people pushing Pathfinder Second Edition, how similar Pathfinder Second Edition is to Fourth Edition D&D. I find that hilarious.
I have not developed the stamina to read Pathfinder Second Edition. I have the rule book because I bought it when I was on offer, and it's gorgeous. Like anything that Paizo does, absolutely beautiful. But it's got 450 pages of rules that I'm probably never going to use, so it ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. Sorry. And to be honest, right now I am playing so much free league content that I probably just play free league on Call of Cthulhu for the rest of the year, except when I actually direct for my friends the Dragonlance campaign. Because they asked me to do it, and I already have the book from before when all this happened. So I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place on this one.
Yeah. The final bit of news that I think I have is Fun Again Logistics has closed their doors.
What?
Fun Again Logistics has posted an announcement. They did this about a day or a half ago. We regret to inform you that Fun Again Logistics and Fun Again Distribution will be ceasing operation. Our last day of business will be April 30th, 2023. After that date, we will no longer be offering any kind of fulfillment, storage, or distribution. The decision to close the business was not easy, but the impact of the past 2 years on operational costs has prevented us from being able to move forward into the future. So they will continue to do work until March 3rd, 2023. At that point, they are closing down operations. So if you have contracts with Fun Again Logistics, suggest you cut your losses and get away from them now, because they're about to close up.
Ouch, what's happened there? I thought they were doing okay.
Well, they're of all the logistical companies from Quartermaster and Bridge, they're one of the ones that were the kind of the least regarded, and I think their reputation was catching up to them potentially. I have never used them. I've never received products from people that were employing them. So beyond that, I guess I'm not 100% sure, um, the details, but I just know that that announcement was made official, and they are closing up operations. So,
Well,
yes,
ouch.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show. Somebody, my friend Angus, when we said, kind of Happy New Year, um, he said I would be. I'm holding myself I'm holding onto my hats for a very tough 2023. I doubt that 60% of the stores that and game cafes that we have in the country can survive
Mm.
2023. He's predicting a really, really tough year. And Angus is he's a clever cookie. He knows his mustard. So I am taking this as a sign that he's probably right.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
hurts. That hurts an awful lot because, I mean, don't get me wrong. The remaining companies are going to be more business for me. Hurrah! But when a company shuts down, considering the level of Kickstarters that we're seeing, not good.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, yeah. So yeah. So that came down. So unfortunately, I hate to say that most of my news were all D&D related. So there was one board game bit of news there. Yeah. So that's it for me for the news for this week. We have not seen at the time of this recording an update about the OGL. I imagine that because they're still been delayed, I imagine they won't make another official posting until probably the end of this week, so they can get people to mull over it over the weekend. And they know, especially considering the leaks, that this that economically Wizards, knowing what Wizards' plans are, knowing that they've hired so many people, spent all this money, that they have no choice. They have to go full digital because that's their direction. When D&D is going to happen, what's going to happen? The big question now is whether or not they're going to double down on their attempts to destroy the D&D community outside of their small bottleneck that they are trying to create. And so, like I said, my reiterate to people is D&D is older than Wizards of the Coast, and it'll survive long after Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have faded into memory. So you can continue playing D&D. No one's taking your books away, and support third party. But
I have loved D&D. Literally saved my life, which is why I have been so loyal to the game over the last 30 odd years. Because Dragons of Autumn Twilight literally saved my life. So, and I have kept buying every single book I've been able to get my hands on since ever. Even if I have never played it, I barely played 4th edition, and I have the whole collection of 4th edition books. I'm not playing an awful lot of 5th edition, and I'm buying every single 5th edition game on every 5th edition book that they're releasing. But if they stop releasing physical games, if they give digital so much more than they give physical, no. Then I'll be out. I'm not going to go down the digital route because it's not my thing.
No, mine either. I'll never. Like I said, I canceled my D&D. I didn't pay for D&D Beyond, but I'm deleting my subscription because I never use it, and I don't. I mean, I barely even use Roll20 and other services I have access to. I'm developing my rule systems for digital platforms, and I'm paying somebody else to do them because I have no interest in working on those platforms. I would rather play like on Skype, and since most of my adventures don't involve dungeon romps anyway, I just posted a video this morning about my favorite moment of being a games master, and it was me telling a story about a moment of role playing. Whenever players talk to other players, they go, "Remember that one moment in that game?" No one ever says, "Remember that time I rolled 2 20s?" No one ever says that. Nobody cares eventually what the dice are rolled, unless you're Arnold Rimmer from Red Dwarf. And there's a very famous joke about how he records every dice roll from every game of Risk he ever played. but that's us making fun of Rimmer and not celebrating him. People talk about, remember that time we had that conversation with that demon and so forth, and that's what people remember.
Okay.
But anyway, what
Well,
do we have for you for your reviews? I think you have a couple, don't you?
well, I have one review. We'll have a preview. I opened this past weekend. I opened to do the unboxing video of a game called Terrorscape. Terrorscape is from Ice Makes Games. It's a Hong Kong-based company that was kind enough to send me a number of games a couple of weeks ago, and now I'm getting onto playing them and doing the unboxing videos. And I am absolutely stunned by the production level. This is a one versus all game. You know the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Say that again?
You know the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
Oh, Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, the Rocky. Right, okay. This is it. But instead of going and finding a mansion with a sweet transvestite, you find a mansion with a few killers. So one player controls the killers and the other players control the up to 3 survivors who stumble upon this mansion. But the cool thing about this game is that it has an incorporated GM screen and dice tower. So the game is asymmetrical, and the player who controls the killers doesn't know where the survivors are. So their survivors can move from one side to the other of the board, but when they make any actions, they accumulate stress or fear points. And when they accumulate enough, that is 3, then they make a noise. When they make a noise, they have to announce where they are on the board. So the killer can move in that direction. Of course, then they can hide or they can disappear and go into another location where they will make some noise until they find the exit or the telephone so they can make a call. And if they make a call, they are making some noise, so they make themselves visible in brackets. But all of this happens hidden from one to the next. So the players, the killers don't know where the survivors are, and the survivors don't know where the players are. The game looks absolutely amazing. I only have one little thing about it that I'm very curious, and is how long it takes to set up, because the game is meant to play in about 30 to 45 minutes. And the setup looks like it's going to be pretty long. So if I have to spend the same length of time setting up the game that I have to spend playing it, surprisingly how put off I am by it. But
so is it hidden movement for both players and the killer?
Yep.
I have seen that only once before. I'm trying to remember. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to remember the name of the game. I actually got this as a review copy. Anomaly. It's called Anomaly. And it's a game it's like the setting you talk about, but it's a sci-fi version where there are players on a space station and there's a monster on a space station. The monster doesn't know where the players are. The players don't know the monster is. The players also don't know where each other person is, and so they have to find subtle ways of communicating with each other. My official review was that it was a fun game for the monster because the monsters got an insane edge over the players. Now, the people who created the game said they didn't encounter that type of overpoweredness. I was like, and ultimately, I kind of sided with them. And then I went to the players and said, what the issue is that at no point did you guys try to cooperate with each other. It was all one man for yourself. They weren't trying to find ways to communicate with each other. They were all just working on their own. And I'm just like, well, you're definitely I mean, that's the baseline of any cooperative game. But yours sounds a bit more interesting.
I'm quite looking forward to playing it. I'm hoping I couldn't play yesterday, Monday, with my Monday group because I was bending over in pain with my back, and I really couldn't face having anyone at home. But I'm hoping to play it next week, and I'm really looking forward to it because one of my players, Anya, she's extremely competitive, and she really doesn't like playing cooperative games. So this should be absolutely perfect for her, so she can be the killer and attempt to destroy everyone else. So that should work very well indeed. And the other game that this I am going to review fully, because we are loving it very, very much, is from the same company. Is a very small card game called Samurai Vassal.
I saw that link you sent me.
And it's incredibly simple game. It's got an expansion within the box and is a game for 2 to 4 players. No, 4 or 6, I can't remember. Let me double check that one. It is for 2 to 6 players. And the way it plays is every player has 6 cards. The cards are 6 people wanting to become the second in command to the shogun. Every card is going to have a number from 1 to 5 and a sixth card without any number. What you have to do, the way the game plays, is you put your card upside down on the table. Every player does. And you all reveal them at the same time. The highest card wins the game. That's it. Unless there is a card with an effect that nullifies that. So, for example, number 1 says if somebody plays number 5 in this round, then 1, 2, 3, and 4 wins, and 5 loses. If you lose, you put your card upside down. If you win, you put your card upside on the table, and you get whatever rewards, which can be 1 or 2 coins, the card shows. The first player to reach 15 coins wins the game. The 6th card, it's the card that has no number, and what you do with it is that you basically skip your round, and it allows you to get back into your hand any card that you have previously played. So eventually you're going to have to play that card because you need to play your card time and time again, your hand time and time again, so you can get enough points. That's it. It plays in about 10 minutes. It's ginormous fun, and it comes with a number of extra cards with extra characters that gives you extra abilities. So there is one, for example, that will allow you to win regardless of what number there is, or that will stop a number from winning the round. And I think there are 19 of them. It plays in considerably less time than the 20 minutes that the Board Game Geek website says. It plays in no time at all. Very, very good fun, and we are resorting to that game to play whilst we wait for the last person in our role-playing game group to arrive. That is Samurai Vassal from Ice Makes Games, and it's very good.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. I'm looking at its score, and it's kind of interesting. And what other coincidence? I have 2 games. One game is called Starlink. Starlink is a drawing game. So it's in no way associated to Elon Musk's Starlink, like saying Elon Musk. Currently runs a 6.5. It is a kind of a party game, 3 to 6 players. The entire objective of the game is that you are playing. Well, you're not playing anybody. You're basically everyone. There's just one big board, big plastic board, and on your turn, you grab a card, and that card has 2 names on them. And you have to draw the item, and hopefully players will guess them. So it's kind of your traditional Pictionary win, lose, or draw variant. The difference is that the words are very simple, and you have to draw them as constellations on the board. The board is a very simple star map. You basically look at it, look at the card, then find a way to try to draw that object using connecting, using stars as connecting points. You can't use curves. You have to have a straight line connecting one star to another, and you're trying to create things. And the words can be as simple as hat, chair, snake, or what have you, a kite. And if you get it small enough and it fits inside this telescope little card, you get an additional point. If you draw something and nobody guesses it, you get no points. If anybody guesses the right answer, you and that person get the number of stars that are on the card. And it's a very short game. Everyone goes twice and the game is over. That was like 10 minutes for us. So we just ran through the whole deck and it took us about a half hour. So it is one of those games where if you want to enjoy it, don't track points, because if you're trying to track points for strategy, you'll probably get annoyed because your victory is very much dependent on whether or not other people can guess things. And also, it's also one of those situations where the first person basically screaming out the answer gets it. And the other issue, of course, so the actual rule says you have to grab, because there's a 30-second timer, 1 minute timer. You have to grab the timer in order to make a guess. But with people with ADHD, they have a tendency of blurting out the answer. So it's very bad for them because if you blurt the answer, supposedly you don't get the chance to get the guess. But we eventually amended that saying, no, whoever announces it first gets it, because people like me just cannot just not blurt out the answer, you know? So the issue with the game is that the cards have wildly different difficulties. The stars range from 2 or 3. So supposedly the difficulty, like the 3-star ones are more difficult, right? Than the 2 stars. And this is so not the case. There are ones where the 2 stars are hugely more complicated and some of the 3 stars are really easy. So it's vastly inconsistent. And that's my only big beef. And the fact that obviously this is a party game that peaks out at 6 players. So it's a very limited group size, 3 to 6 players, which is very unusual. Usually when you have a game group that goes down to 6 players, usually they want to make it available for 2, but making it 3 to 6 creates a situation where it's got a very limited playability. The second game, have you tried Starlink, by the way?
No.
Starlink is a game. Starlink is a game that we. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I didn't try. It was explained to me at Spiel this year, and I was gutted, absolutely gutted, when I went to buy my kind of strategy when I go to Spiel is that I spend Wednesday, which is the press release day, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday doing interviews. On Wednesday, I actually take a look around and see what games I haven't seen in the Board Game Geek announcements or whatever, so I can arrange more interviews for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then on Sunday, I spend the day just buying the games that I didn't get to interview people or that I saw and I was curious about. I just buy games. So I was absolutely gutted when I went on Sunday and they didn't have any on sale because it wasn't coming out until, later, November, I think it was, ready for Christmas. And they didn't have either any review copies that they could give me because they just had the prototypes that they were showing. So I was so miserable when they told me that. So I am very jealous that you have actually played this game before I have.
The irony of that is that I think the game is just okay. I seriously don't know whether or not this game is going to see a lot of action. Most of the time, whenever we have a large group of players, we'll do a large party game. This one seems to be, it's a plot filler. But like I said, we burned through the whole deck in half an hour. And after playing it, I was just like, it's an okay game. It's one of those situations that it's cursed by not being amazing or not being bad. It's just okay. The other game is will probably. I don't know when this game came out. I'll say I played it.
Wait a second. Can I stop you there? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about how it plays? Because I don't think it's. I don't think I get clear why you think it's just an okay game.
Well, so like I said, Starlink, like I said, it's a variation of Pictionary, or win, lose, or draw. But in those games, there are teams. So one person is trying to draw something, and then his team is trying to guess it. And so if they guess it, then you win. And the cards, like I said, it's much more of a party game because you have large groups of people.
Right.
This game is one that's limited to 6 players. So unlike games like the big party games where you can go up to 20, 30 players, this game peaks out at 6 because you have to stand around a table. You have to sit around. It's not like many of the judge card games where you could be around a large group. This game, you have to be able to draw on this 20-inch by 20-inch circle, so everybody has to lean in on it, which is the reason why it peaks out at 6, because you can't have that many people crowding around a table. And then, of course, you have the pressure that you have 1 minute to draw. But the other issue, of course, is that when you look at the object, you're like, oh, I know what this looks like. But then you have to figure out how in the world am I going to draw it? So you have to look at the board, find a patch of stars where you can maybe draw it, and then hope to God you can draw something. And the funny thing is that if it doesn't work, you have to clean it off and try it again. And only if somebody guesses your constellation correctly does it stay on the board. Otherwise, you got to wipe it off and the next person goes. But it can be frustrating, like saying something, a kite, relatively easy. You draw a little string and then you put a little star on the end. But sometimes saying a table is a lot more difficult than you might think. And some of the really easy ones were extremely hard because it's difficult to draw a 3-dimensional object on a 2-dimensional static when you have to connect dots. So it can be very conceptually tricky. And the fact that the star difficulty, the stars awarded, have almost no bearing on the words, because I've seen 2-star ones which are horrendously difficult and 3 stars that were cakewalks. So there's very little consistency between them. And since you can burn through the entire deck in about 30 minutes, yeah, there's some variety because you're not using all the cards, because you use the cards for points, so you're burning through the deck quite quickly. But that also being said, it's also a game where you've seen all the bells and whistles. And if I'm presented with a game where I get to draw a party game, I'll just play Pictionary. It's just, you get this big pad, you put it on a big easel, you're drawing stuff. It's actually enjoyable. Starlink is somebody trying to take Win, Lose, or Draw or Pictionary and then compress it into a smaller form factor. And I don't know whether or not that was needed.
Fair. That is fair enough. I have to say, only a small stack of cards I'm disappointed about. I was expecting at least 50 to 70 cards to go with that game to make it be more replayable. Because once you play that game 5 times, with drawing just a couple of lines, you're going to know what people are going through. Because once you've learned how to draw once the objects, you're never going to try to draw it in a different way.
Yeah. In this situation, there are actually quite a few cards, but because of the point system, you're using the cards as points, so you're not going to see most of them. So there is the potential for variety. And what I'm saying, though, is the fact that because you're limited to drawing and connecting dots on the stars, I can see this being a much more childish game than an adult game. I think that if you want to have a game where kids can play a game and they're not making a huge mess, I think Starlink is a great game for like 6 and up to 14. But I think once you get to be an adult, there are much more technically complex and more interesting games that use the same kind of ideology, the idea of drawing something and getting people to guess. I would much rather play those games in Starlink.
Fair enough. Fair enough indeed. Oh, I forgot. I played another game.
What's that?
One of the worst gaming experiences I have had in my life.
Oh, please tell me.
Oh, it was horrible. Okay, you know that in my day-to-day job, I work for a cybersecurity company.
Yep.
And one of the things that we're doing for the company is actually designing board games and card games so we can help raise awareness of cybercrime for families. So I was given this board game that one of our competitors that I shan't mention commissioned to a game development studio from Spain. The game is called Cybersecurity Attack. Okay, super original from the get-go. Now, What does the game consist of? Well, one player is going to be the enterprise, the company, and the other players are going to be hackers. And what every player is going to do is try to attack the company in order to gain access to their systems and overtake control and take control over the company.
Right.
So far, so good. You've got a board with the structure of the company and the systems, the different systems you have. So you may have servers, logistics, and so on and so forth. And each server, logistics, and so on and so forth has its own compartments. Now, attacking each compartment costs money. But if you succeed in your attack, then you recoup that money and make a profit. So it's a good idea for the players, for the hackers to attack. Now, the game comes with 18 different decks of cards.
Wow.
The company has 9 different departments. Each one of those departments has its own deck with its own defenses for specific attacks that can be directed to each system. So at the beginning of the game and every round thereafter, the company's player can draw a number of cards from each deck to protect themselves, because theoretically they have their cybersecurity team and they are ready for anything. And the hackers, they have to use the money they have to buy the tools that they have to use to deploy attacks versus X, Y, or Z department. So if you deploy an attack, say against the server, that's going to cost you $5 million. But if the company has the defenses to stop your attack, then you lose that money. If the company doesn't, then you take the cheat and you gain $20 million in assets from the company. Then it goes to the next player, and then it continues. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Now, why was this such a bad experience? Firstly, the rules are written by an algorithm. I'm not going to say that they have been written by an AI, because ChatGPT would do a way better job out of it. Really badly, awfully, disgustingly written. We could not make head to tails of the rules. By the time we understood how the game plays, we wanted it to end. Oh, by the way, something else. If you get to conquer 3 systems, 3 departments of each section of the company, you find out 1 letter from the password that the company is using to protect the systems. If you guess the password mid-game, you win the game.
Oh.
And the password has to have 9 letters or numbers or special characters. But if you guess it, that's it. You win the game.
Wow.
So there's yet another extra layer of gameplay there. So the rules are incredibly badly written. Really, really awfully badly written. Then the decks were identical for the hackers and the company, except for the icon on the back. Same color, same patterns, same everything. But what's worse is that the decks between them the colors were so similar that one of my friends, who's got some sort of daltonism or color blindness, could not differentiate the colors.
Mm.
So he didn't know what he was playing. They were that similar. And from the accessibility point of view, the cards had the name of the attack, what the attack does, and they're all real life attacks. And in the bottom little right corner of the card, you have the code for the attack. So when a company receives a cyber attack, say, I have a 76A. So everybody knows what to do with a 76A. You needed a card to repel the attack with exactly the same number in exactly the same place. So the most important bit of information that the card had to give you was hidden in the most inaccessible place in the card. So they had to be constantly shuffling in their hands to find out if they had the right defense against the attack or not.
Wow.
It was so painful. Absolutely atrocious. I am so glad that this game is not commercially available, so no one has to go through this again, because and by the way, no insert whatsoever. So we spent about half an hour sorting out between 18 different decks of cards with similar backgrounds.
Wow.
So everything about this game was bad.
You have stolen my thunder, because I thought I had the worst game I've played all year. Because unfortunately, unlike your game, the game I'm going to talk about, I'll do it quickly because I know we're past our hour point, is commercially available
Right.
by a major publisher. And it is, to give you an idea, most of the time when I dislike a game, usually it's whenever you're in a group, there's very few options where in the entire group all go, can we stop playing this? This is a game where everybody said, let's stop. This game sucks. And this is Wayfinders. You can't see it, but it's called, there we go, Wayfinders,
right,
by Pandasaurus. This is a game that you can buy everywhere. Ignoring the production value, this is one of those games where the board is a bunch of tiles you lay down, kind of like a Forbidden Desert and so forth, where you lay down tiles on the board. Now, you also have a bunch of plastic pieces that have so much flash attached to them, you're going to spend 5 minutes with a knife cutting them off. But I'm ignoring that, or the one-sided tokens that are referred to as cubes in the manual, and that is the least egregious spelling mistake that they put in their game. But the whole objective is you start your little plane, because everyone gets little planes, which are adorable, and you're on tiles like this. This is actually, I think, the central tile. This is the one that everyone starts on because there's no cost. And now you think the whole game is you flying around, but that's actually only 1/5 of the game is you flying around. The majority of the game involves these little, this board right here. Everybody has 5 meeples. And in a move that's very mechanically similar, but spiritually bankrupt from Zulkin, you place your meeples on here. And then when you decide to take your meeples back, that's when you gain resources. Now in Zulkin, this is a fantastic mechanic, because the longer your meeples stay out, the more you get when you draw them in. This does not have that. So in here, you see these 3 extra spots here. So the whole point is that these tokens are laid out randomly on here. And when you decide to remove your meeples, you remove them all. You can't remove one. You remove all of them when you decide to. And you can put up to 5, but you can recall them sooner. So you can put 2 down and then recall those 2. You can put 5 down and then recall those 5. And when you do, you take the top token from where your meeples are. Now, this seems like a neat idea in theory, and in a 2-player game, it might be useful. But in a 4-player game, if you have 5 meeples each, everybody's occupying every single spot. And you say, I need this token, and this token, but I decide to pull my meeples first. I then mess up this entire line, and now you don't get any of the tokens that you want. which means when you decide to pull your guys back, you're getting an assortment of tokens that you don't need. Now, why do you need certain tokens? Well, the objective falls to these little cards. Now, you have to spend, so beyond the fact these little piles of poo, which are actually mountains, are color-coded. They're color-coded very poorly. And the color of that token, let's see if I can find one that matches what I have here. Yeah, there we go. So if you want to cross through this area, you have to put a token that matches the color of the mountain. And then when you get to your destination, you have to spend resources equal to the symbols across here. So in this situation, you have to put down a red, a purple, and a green. And then when you spend those, you can put a hanger on one of these spots. Seems straightforward. Now, in case you're wondering, these little 2 dots here mean absolutely nothing, and it's excruciatingly confusing. You see this one here? It's got a whole bunch of dots. Those dots mean absolutely nothing.
Then why are they there?
I don't know. I don't know why they're there other than to confuse people. And it gets worse. So when the first person, the person puts down their hanger in the one position, they pay to the supply for the cost of putting down the hanger. The next person that wants to put down in 2, 3, or 4, everybody has to pay the first player, which means whoever gets that area first starts to load up on these tokens.
Okay.
There's also benefits for each card. And now this is where things get confusing. I thought Founders of Gloomhaven had a confusing point system. So this whole system is where you put your guys will dictate how you get points. And sometimes the points are if you have, I played the game like only a couple days ago. I still don't know how this point system works. This one, you get 3 points for every yellow base you don't have. And this one is 4 of a different type. It's a very confusing system. So at the end of the game, you're spending a long time just trying to figure out what points you got. But the issue is the fact that because you don't know which resources you're going to end up getting, you have no strategy on where you go. Because you never end up with the tokens you want, because you never do. The first person to pull their tokens is the only person that actually gets to say which tokens he has. From that point on, nobody gets to decide which tokens that they want. It's always random. It would actually be an equal mechanic to pull 5 random tokens from the bag, and you have the same amount of odds of getting the tokens you want. That's how insanely broken that the fact that 4/5 of the game is doing something which is worthless, because you always get a random assortment of tokens, because you always take the top. You don't get to choose. You always take the top, and then it gets filled up randomly afterward, which means you have no say in the tokens you get. If you take your tokens off and you get to choose one of the 2, that would be interesting. But no, it's the top, which means this game is completely random. And so when you get your random assortment of tokens, you just look at the board and go, where can I go with these tokens, and where can I put a base on this round? So it's not about I need to go here. It just I get a random assortment of tokens, and then I decide where I can go with these resources. And eventually I figured out the perfect strategy, which is find a way to do things that get you more resources. Like, you have a limit. You can't hoard resources. At the end of your turn, you can't have more than 5. But if you have 4 and then you load up to 5, you'll have 9 tokens, which means you'll have more than enough resources to go anywhere you want, because you're generally going to have a random assortment. So you can go anywhere you want and put bases anywhere you want, and chances are you can probably do it twice, because you'll have a larger assortment. And as long as you're below 4 by the end of your turn, you got to go where you wanted to go. So the strategy is to make sure that when you end your turn, you have as many tokens as you can, go where you want, place down the tokens, and then that's your turn. But it's still a complete random assortment of tokens. Sometimes when you land on these cards, you get tokens, which are random, because you pull them from the bag. And then people who put down bases will end up getting a massive supply of tokens, which means there's a massive first player advantage, which means the person that starts putting down these bases first will always be in the lead, because you have to pay him to put your base on this same location. So it runs out of control really fast. So after 4 or 5 turns, we were probably like, it's only when the first person places their last base, and you have like 8 of these. We got to when we put down our third base after about 25, 30 minutes or so, maybe 25 minutes, we all decided to end the game. And I looked at this and it's like, what happened? Like, why, who designed the visual aesthetic? Why did you fail in the visual aesthetic? Why did you fail on the how confusing the point system were? How did you fail a resource distribution
Yeah.
mechanic that became entirely randomized? This is going to go down as probably, I've had games where the funny thing is, Pandasaurus is reaching a point where they're becoming one of the more disappointing. It seems like the only good game they put out are the Dinosaur Island games, because I played this and Machikoro is awful. It's one of the worst games we ever played. It's another game that Nicole and I stopped playing. Like literally, Nicole boxed this game up, gave it to me, and said, "Sell it."
Wow.
That's so there won't be a second play. We all decided to end this game early because it was not fun. It's currently trending a 6.5. Starlink, which is a better game, has about the same score. So I can only imagine brand loyalty is the only reason why Wayfarers is not trending worse. But yeah, this is the most disappointing game I have played in years, and that is Wayfinders by Pandasaurus.
Wow. Way to start the year.
I play good games, I swear.
Well, let's look at the bright side. We can only go up.
Yeah, exactly. We have a bunch of games we got from Christmas. I'm really looking to playing a whole bunch, and we will talk about that soon. Unfortunately, I know we have the Dune game to mention, and I know you didn't care for that one, so we're looking forward to doing that one.
No. I did care for that one. My friends did not.
Oh, okay.
My friends did not, but only because it is very much a solitaire game. If you play with more people, at least the first chapter, it doesn't really feel like you're playing together. It's just somebody reading some cards and the rest of the people doing very little.
Yeah.
But no, I did care about the game. I thought it was very brilliantly written, but we need to do a proper long review about it.
I want to do another mission. I've just done the introduction. I want to do one full mission, and then I want to talk about it. And hopefully we'll get that in the next week or two.
Yes.
Promise. Now that my group is getting together on a more regular basis. Yes.
Promise, Ignacy, we'll do it. We love you very much.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that's it for us today, isn't it?
Yep.
Good. Okay, bye. No, not yet. People, thank you. Thank you very much for being there. As always, it's very muchly appreciated. I know that I should do funky things like having music and little do between sections, but this is the most random gaming board podcast out there.
I'll try to keep it regular. We have a news and we have reviews.
Yeah, but
I actually have a list of people we get to interview. I just everything. If with the moment I think I have someone lined up, suddenly something explodes in the news, and we end up having to talk about that.
Yeah,
if it's not AI art, then it's Wizards of the Coast.
Oh, and there is more AI that we need to talk about because I had somebody, and it is somebody that I respect immensely, who wants to come to talk with us. You know, my friend Rolf Mühlberger wants to come to talk to us about chat AI in games.
And considering that we talk about having a DM AI, this is entirely topical.
Yep, I think that would be incredibly fun. So we need to make a list of the people we want to have, because I want to interview Graham Davis. I think it would be very nice to talk to him because he's an absolutely adorable guy. I don't know if you know him.
Nice. I do not.
He's a wonderful human being. He's an absolutely wonderful human being. So, but until the next time, people, I'm still in Twitter at GMS Magazine. Of course, I am at GMS Magazine in Facebook, and you can find me by my name too, funnily enough. And send us emails, podcast@gmsmagazine.com. I am trying to be a lot better answering quicker. So don't disappoint me. Say hi.
Yep, and this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. I am endeavoring to go on more on social media this year. I've done quite a few videos on YouTube, based off what we're talking about. I'm running a series of videos weekly now where I'm designing a rule system, a 5e variant rule system live with feedback. All these game companies, they announce a rule system and then they privately write it in closure, and then after a year they announce it, and then everyone play tests it. And I'm going to say, you know what? Let's all design it together. Let's all get together and talk about it and get live feedback. This may never come to anything, but it's a fun thing to get live feedback from people. And they're throwing ideas at me, and I'm throwing ideas at them. And it was a very interesting collaborative experience. It's a very interesting collaborative experiment that I hope to replicate. The next one's going to be Wednesday, January 18th at 11 o'clock.
So tomorrow.
PST.
So send me a link so I can tweet about it.
Yep.
Okay.
I will do so.
Good. Human beings, we love you very, very, very much, but probably not as much as your partners. Bye.
Bye.